because it would be nice not to like have to, if someone can watch this video instead of eating up all of my time, it would be useful.
Yeah, understood.
So yeah, since we are recording, so we're just here to show a practice mock interview, and we're just gonna kind of go over the techniques that I recommend for people to get ready for really any of the interviews they have with most of the companies that have some kind of technical interview. So do you have I sent you I sent you kind of a preps email. Do you want me to send that to you again, or do you have it somewhat handy?
I think I still have it handy. Let me check. Yep.
And then I'm probably going to go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
Just to I won't share it the whole time, but to kind of review from that too. Oh, did it automatically put it in bullets? Okay. It's cleaned up. So I'll share my screen. So this is the phase I always recommend for people to go through. So step 1 is the listen phase. So you want to consider writing down what you've heard the interviewer ask. And to get out of this phase, you always want to end the phase with a question like, did I hear the prompt correctly?
Okay.
Then the next, and once again, these are just notes I have for the cracking the coding interview. It goes over this process on page, at least on this version, on page 62. So if you have that book, I'm just rephrasing the same thing from that book. So there's nothing magical here.
Right. Okay.
Then for phase 2, you have the example cases. So end this phase with a question like, should I consider more edge cases? Brute force, you can think of yourself being out of this phase with the stating a statement such as, this is my first algorithm and thinking about how to do this, and its current run complexity is this. Then you can try to optimize it. Sometimes there's like gotcha questions and you just don't think of the best way to optimize it, but at least if you talk through it, then you can end this phrase with this thing such as the best complexity that I can think of is this. And then make sure you try to walk through it. This is one of the things I coach with people the most. A lot of people know how to just jump in and start writing code. A lot of people don't have kind of their own pseudo language to talk about code before they write it.
Right.
So you might need to come up with whiteboarding techniques, or you might have to come up with a technique where you type on the keyboard and you type on the keyboard and then you kind of are showing what you're doing before you're writing code. And then we'll jump into, then after you do that whiteboarding walkthrough session, then you'll actually jump in and write code. So if you've listened to any kind of other like prep guides, they'll always say like the first thing you want to do is just not jump in and start writing code. And this is why, because you really want to work through these first 5 phases before you even write your first line of code. And then the phase ends when you wrote your code and you've double checked each line of code and you say the phrase, I've double checked each line of code, I think this will work. And then you'll want to go, even after you've checked everything, then you want to go through and actually run. We have to almost like in your head kind of do a simulator, actually draw out the variables on the whiteboard if needed, and then show that your algorithm works as you think. So those are the steps. Let's jump into, I'll show you an example of me doing it first, and then I'll ask you for you to do one. Let's see. We're going to do this in Codility. Okay, so here is the link that we'll be using. And then so
You're just going to email it?
I think I sent you in chat. Can you see the chat?
Oh, yep, I see it. Sorry. Got it.
Then you can join the thing. And then I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to do it first.
Okay.
So we'll just give a simple question. I'm sure you've heard of this one on the internet before. And this one's so easy that it may not be the super best one to demonstrate to, but I'll do my best. So I'm going to kind of pretend like you're interviewing me. This first one. So let me try to get this set up as best I can. And then once again, this one isn't the best question to do this example for, but it's just an easy one that's on the internet that we can kind of walk through.
Sure.
So here I go, sharing my screen again. So yeah, so you've asked me to do this task. So the first thing is to listen. So I'm listening by just reading it out loud. Write a program that prints a number from 1 to 100 for multiples of 3, print fizz instead of the number, and for multiples of 5, print buzz. For those numbers, which are multiples of both 3 and 5, print fizz buzz. So now at this point, I have a choice. I can open up the canvas and start to draw some things, type some things in, or I can just jump in. I personally like to just jump in with comments. Okay. So print all numbers. But if, you know, and so this is me just restating, but if divisible by 3 or 5, need to handle with 3 and 5 being special. I'm probably got my bad spelling there. Special. So I'm going to print all the numbers. So to kind of clarify, I can ask, you know, questions or whatever, like, do you want me to print the number and fizz? I'm only going to print the number if it doesn't print fizz. So it's either the number or the text. It won't be both at the same time. So then so then to get out of this phase, I want to ask a question like, do you think I'm understanding the problem correctly? So based on what I kind of summarized here, does it seem like I'm understanding what the problem is?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so now we're going to go into the example case. So consider write down some example cases. So here we're going to, you know, we're going to start by starting at 1. We're going to go to 100. What cases are most interesting? We want to look at the edge cases, both 1, 100. We want to look at the edge case where it's 3. We want to look at the edge case where it's 5. And 3 and 5 is special, so 3 times 5 is going to be 15. So those are basically the edge cases that we want to think about the most. So I'm going to end this phase with a question like, do you think I should consider more edge cases, or do you think I covered most of them?
Yeah, I think you covered most of the big ones.
And then so now here we're going into my brute force algorithm. So this is where it might be a good time to start to pull out some whiteboards. So so my plan is just to get my pen out here. My plan is just to loop through all the numbers, starting at 1, going to 100. For each case, I need to check to see, is it a multiple of 3? Is it a multiple of 5? And then if it's neither one of those, then if it's neither one of those, then I'll need to print out just the number that's getting looped. So this is kind of just the brute force I can think of. This is going to iterate through each number through. So it's going to visit each node. So that's going to be n. And so the big O(n) of this is going to be for all the numbers. It's going to run in basically the n time.
Mm-hmm.
Since I have to print something out for each number and have to deal with everything, I think the best theoretical I can get to is big O(n). I can't really think of a way of doing this better than n, because I'm just going to have to loop through everything.
Yep.
Maybe if I do something super fancy that I can't think of today. So let's get back to my thing here. So I've talked out loud before writing code. Consider writing down some pseudocode that just answers the question. So let's go ahead and write some pseudocode. So loop 1 to 100. And then here's where it's a little bit tricky. It depends on how I want to handle the case. I just got to make sure for this exclusionary I handle it. So if I do an else if, I got to put the 3 and 5 at the top. If I do a different exclusionary, I can do it below. So if mod 3 and if mod 3, then we're going to just print fuzz. We're just going to print the fizz. We're not going to do an else in this case. I'm going to do if mod 5, then print buzz. And then in this case, I'm going to say if not mod 3 or 5, then just print the number. So here I have some pseudocode. I think for as far as optimizing, I think the book talks about BUD. You want to reduce lines of code, reduce unwanted code. I can't really think of a way of reducing any lines of code. I currently have this as 4 lines of code, so it seems pretty efficient to me.
Right.
So back to so I considered the best theoretical complexity. I don't think I can beat bit O(n). So I ended this by saying the first algorithm won in big O complexity, and the best complexity, and this is the best complexity I can think of for this problem. We walked through some pseudocode. So I think in this example, we're starting at 1, 3, print fizz buzz. Yeah, if I wanted to, I could get out the canvas and look at these cases a little bit better. This is kind of a pretty simple problem, so it's a little bit of an overkill, but just for the illustration points. We want to consider the edge cases. So what happens in the case of 1? If it's a mod of 3, so is 1 a mod of 3? The answer is no, so that's going to fail. Is 1 a mod of 5? The answer is no, so that's going to fail. And then so it's the biggest thing I have a question about is should I make that an and? Should I make that an and or an or? I have to think through that. So let's see. It's a case of a 1 is not a mod 5, so that would be false. And 1 is not a mod 5. Yeah, I think I definitely want the or. So I think I've walked through it and made sure that was an or. So for this example, I think the pseudocode is going to work. So here we are in the implementation phase. So now at this point, I can just implement. Pretty straightforward, hopefully. Why are my cap locks? That's throwing me off. As long as I is less than or equal. See, I'm even super nervous. Everyone gets nervous. Like, it's so easy, but I'm like nervous.
And you're gonna do a problem, then I'm gonna do a problem, and everything tightened up, And then you showed me FizzBuzz, and it's like, oh, well, I could do that one, but I'm still terrified of what you're gonna ask me to do.
So if, oh, my caps lock is throwing me. If I mod 3 format dot print fizz if I mod 5 format dot. Yeah, it's definitely filling the judgment. It's like, I know I did something wrong here. These comments are almost throwing me off. They're not really useful.
No.
Got my print, got my buzz. If, let's see, I'm even blanking out on my not operator for. Oh, I gotta remember my De Morgan's law. If yeah. And I can't remember. I've been doing a few different languages lately. I've been switching between C# and Go. I think the not operator works in Go, but I at this exact moment. My pretty print just seems so. Oh, that's why it's being ugly. Then I want to make a new line each time, so I'm going to do just a print line. So let's see. I want to make sure I write through it. So main. See, they got my for loop. Print don't need parentheses and go. Don't need parentheses and go. Got the modulus operator. Don't need semicolons and go. If. This is the thing I'm most unconfident about is, do I need to type out not or not? And I'm also unconfident about the De Morgan's law. If I distribute the not, this will turn into not and. So I think for now I'm going to keep it as. So let's see. Okay, I checked for semicolons. I think I'm doing pretty well. Oh, let's do my testing phase. So we're starting at I equals. So I like to just, you can do this on the whiteboard if you have a whiteboard, but you'll just say here like comment. So I already have an error. I got to start at 1. So I is going to be equal to 1. So I starts at 1. So I modulo 3 is false. So we're going to get the false. So that's going to skip over that. It's not an else statement, so it'll start the next one. I mod 3, that's going to be false. Let's skip over that one. So we're going to have I mod false or false, false or false. So if one of these is true, it'll turn to true, and then I'll flip it to false. And it will skip over it. If they're both, yeah, so I think we're good. So this is going to be, that's going to be false or false, which will flip to true. So it'll print out the number 1. We're good. Okay, what's the other edge case we're going to check? 100. So we're going to go to 100. I did less than or equals 100. So I think we're good there. 100 is going to be modulo 3. That should be false. Modulo 5. That should be true. So it's going to go into there. Let's check my 3 case. So that's going to be true, false. So we have a true or false, which equals true, which will turn into a false, will fall out. Check my 5 case. 5 is false, 5 is true, so that'll execute. And then we have the false or true, which turns into a true, turns into a false. So we're good there. And then we have the 15 case. So modulo 3 is going to be true. So we'll print out the fizz, we'll get the true, we get the buzz. And then so we're going to have a true or true, which turns into a true. So it'll get flipped to a false and fall through. So I think we're good. So here we are at the end of the phase.
All right.
I think the last line of code it will be. So I think at the last line of code, the I will equal 100, and we'll have everything printed out 1 to 100. And here's moment of truth. Let's see what I messed up. Oh no. And normally, as part of at least the interviews that I've been involved in, they let you fix things after you run things.
Yeah,
And so
that's good.
not everything has to be super perfect. What's going on here? Number. What did I get wrong here? Solution 20. Oh, I forgot. I'm not in C++. I have to explicitly say equals, let's see, 0. So I got to say 0 is not true and go. So we got to do, yeah, we basically, only when this is 0 do we care. So I was using a C trick of expecting anything that's not 0 to work. And it has to be a, so mess that up. What else did we mess up? Oh, is this formatted out print? Is that what I did wrong?
I don't really know Go, but
it had when it first pulled up a hello world that I deleted without even looking at it.
of course.
Oh, invalid operator. Yeah, this is what I worried about. I think it's or and go. And then if that's not, that's probably, or I don't know how the not works in Go. Okay, I think the not's still broken. You can tell how much I've been prepping.
You don't need to prep, man. You're good.
Does this not have autocomplete? Format dot. Out dot. Oh, did I forget to capitalize? Are you joking me? Print. Cannot refer to unimported name. What was 19 griping about? Syntax error colon. Wow, it's been a while since I've. What am I doing wrong? Well, anyways, you can see even I get nervous. So yes, do you have to prep for this? You probably need to prep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say you don't know Go, so you can't fix me.
Nope.
That's and this is another thing that I run into is if you are working in multiple languages, make sure you're super sharp on the one language and definitely don't try to switch languages in the middle of an interview. I've had people do
Right.
that.
like fmt.capitalprint might do it.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering. But the auto, maybe they're autocomplete.
They don't have
Turn me
out though. It was just fmt.capitalprint without the out.
Oh,
I don't know why the autocomplete's lowercase though.
oh, so it's the I choose to blame the editor.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Maybe once you type something, it'll autocomplete it that way from then on, even if
So I
it's
assume
wrong.
this is capital print.
Seems like
I'm
a
still
reasonable
messing
assumption.
up. Line 19, 26. Oh yeah, it's still throwing me off. Is it the not? Line 26. Oh, yeah, equals or. Yeah, can you Google for me what's the not operator in Go apparently? That's embarrassing.
I mean, it looks like it's an exclamation point.
Oh, so it says line 26 affecting or unexpected or. Oh, so what's the or operator apparently in Go?
Okay, fair. Yeah. Logical operators. Or is a double pipe.
Oh, that's what I had the first time. I
Yeah.
don't know what oh, I think I didn't have the equals 0.
Oh, well, that would do it.
Shoot.
Hey, there we go.
Okay, so there we go. I successfully showed you FizzBuzz and it took me a half hour apparently to FizzBuzz.
FizzBuzz.
So this would be an indicator of I need more practice. Okay, so let's clear this out. And then I'm gonna do my best to coach you through. So go ahead and yes, you have this on your screen now.
No, I clicked the link and it says your interview has not yet started.
Oh, I got to click start interview. There we go.
There it goes.
Okay, so first off, choose your language of choice.
Yeah, let's not do Go. We'll go with Java for now.
Okay, so so the one I'm going to give you, so this is just from Crack the Coding Interview. So if you've heard this one, let me know. I can do a different one. We'll do, and then I always like to do this during the interview. So I don't like to just drop something in the task and just off you go. I normally like to communicate through it. And then sometimes it's not super clear. So you got to make sure you ask questions.
Okay.
So for a string, for any permutations of that string, can it form a palindrome?
Okay.
So remember, work the thing. So consider writing down what you heard.
Yeah.
And remember the end phrase.
Assuming there's an eraser on here.
Oh, reach on the canvas.
Yeah. Can I type on the task area? It seemed like it was locked or something.
Yeah, you can't have. Yeah, I think only the. Yeah, you want to erase that?
Is there an eraser or something?
Yeah, right here under that eraser. Oops, click eraser.
Yours looks different than mine.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, I found it. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So let's do text box. All right. So you said for any string. Sorry. Can you restate the question? I should have typed it up as soon as I heard it.
for a string.
Okay.
Any permutation of that string, will it form a palindrome?
Okay. For a string, does any permutation of that string form a palindrome? All right. I mean, I've heard problems like this, but I don't think I've done this exact one at all. Change this around a little bit. So let's see. So I've listened, I've written down the problem. Do I start with, oh, you've got it pulled up here. Okay, step 2 is example. So did I state the problem?
You haven't got to step 1 yet, because I don't feel like you've understood it yet.
Yeah. So here's how I understand what you're asking. You're going to give me a string, and I need to check if any rearrangement of those characters can form a palindrome, which means it reads the same forward and backwards.
Yep. So the permutation has to use, you can rearrange the characters, but it has to use all of the characters.
Must use all the characters.
And then you define a palindrome correctly that forward to backwards. So I would probably recommend you write that down, but it's up to you, you know.
Yep. And you want me to print out the actual palindrome, or you just want me to tell you if it forms one or not?
Yeah, you do not need to print it out. You just tell me if it forms one. So okay. It'll return it basically a true or false. Yeah, you don't need to print out the palindrome. You don't need to tell me the permutations that you used to get there. You just have to say true or false. A permutation does form a palindrome.
Okay, great. Okay, let me read through it one more time myself here. For string, does any permutation of that string form a palindrome? This is all characters in the string, same forwards and backwards. Do not need to print out the palindrome. Just give a true or false. Okay. Okay. Do you think I understand the problem as stated?
Yeah, I think you do.
Okay. So let's go on to step 2 here. Let me come up with a couple examples and write them down here just as some kind of simple test cases. So the string cat, I would expect to return false. I should consider too that when I get to coding, there might be some differences between even and odd numbered strings, just in how the algorithm ends up working. But a string like ABC, well, AB would be true. Would it be expected to be true? Whoa, that's not what I expected. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. Okay. So let me think. Some special test cases. If you give me a string that was one character, my expectation is that you would expect a true from that. Is that what you're thinking?
Yep.
Okay. Obviously, any 2 character strings would have to be the same character twice to give true. And okay, I'm just starting to think through in my head of how this would work. As far as the kind of the example cases here, is it reasonable to just print up a couple example cases and move on, or obviously considering edge cases also, but I'm not supposed to be trying to figure out the actual algorithm to solve this problem at this point, right?
Yeah, for the most part, not. Yeah, I mean, come on. This is just the tips from the book. This isn't
Yep.
the tried and true. This won't get you a job anywhere, but this is just the
Sure.
way that it's a really good way to make sure you're at least prep.
Yeah.
So it may or may not have sense to follow these exact steps in the interview, but every time you go to do a prep interview on Leap Code or whatever, that if you follow these steps in order, because the biggest thing you want to do is when you get nervous is when things fall off the rails. And so,
Yeah.
if you look at the problem and it just makes perfect sense, you just start typing like a typewriter, then you're kind of good. But you're
Yeah.
probably going to get nervous. You're probably not going to solve it. And then if you want to make sure that in the interview, even if you don't solve it at all, you've talked through it all, that the interviewer knows what you're thinking, and you can still totally pass the interview without writing any working code in some cases.
Understood.
Because you at least walk through the algorithm and explained how you would do it, even if you ran out of time.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I at least captured some of the edge cases here of a single letter, double letters. Obviously, if it's a double letter, they need to be the same. So something like AB would return false. I have an example of a working case and a not working case. Is there more edge cases that you think would be smart to consider?
You mentioned it, but I don't see you really doing the edge case to tease it out. Just, it might be helpful for you to make sure you watch out for your odd or even length of strings. Do you have some good test cases for that?
Yeah, so I've got an odd one here. So let me write down, well, I have an even one here, I guess.
Yeah, but it's so simple that it's like,
Yeah. Let me write out a little bit longer. ABC, let's do ABC twice. So it's even numbered, and it would form a palindrome if rearranged.
Okay, yeah. So I think with that edge case, you're good.
Okay. All right, so let's start thinking through how to do this. So what is a palindrome? A palindrome is going to have okay, let me just type out what I'm thinking here, I guess. If string has even, if it has an even number of characters, we need an even number So if the string is an even number of characters, something like ABC, ABC, I would need to have an even number of each unique character in the string. So in this case, we have 3 unique characters, A, B, and C. Each of them shows up twice, which is an even number of each character. So that could be rearranged to form a palindrome. Do I have a, no, I don't. So let me write down a, okay, there we go. So ABC, ABD would be false, of course. So in this case, I have 4 unique characters, but it's because it's an even number. D and C both only show up 1 time, so that would fail this condition, and it would not be a palindrome in that case. And if the string has an odd number of characters, I would still need an even number of each character except for 1. So whether that center character was just a single character, like in this case, the C is single, A and B both have 2 of each. But if we had 3 C's, that would still be fine, because the 2 would pair off and we'd have 1 in the center. So what I'm thinking is, if I just go through the string as given and count up each of the characters that are in that string, I should be able to determine if it's a palindrome without taking all the permutations of that string by just knowing if we have the right counts of each character. If we have an even length string and we have an odd number of characters, of odd count of the given character, then we know it's not a palindrome. So let's see, as far as complexity, well, we're definitely going to be at least O of n, because I need to walk through each character in the string to do the counts. There may be a way, if we knew the length of the string, to bail out at some point. If the counts were, at a certain place, but I think that would just add complexity. I'm not sure that really is. I don't think that's a first pass, unless we have like a really special case kind of data set that we know that kind of thing happens. So I'm expecting O of n complexity to walk through each character and to we'll have to just count them in some kind of data structure. So we could use like a hash map where the key is the character and the value is the count, or an array. I didn't ask this earlier. Does it matter if we're dealing with capital or lowercase letters? Is the string all going to be one or the other? Or do I need to account for that?
Yeah, let's just assume normal, American A through Z alphabet, and we'll just assume that we're only dealing with lowercase.
Okay. Okay. So if that's the case, then, excuse me, we know that there's a maximum of 26 counters that we need. So I could do something like just an array where the index in the array is the number, the character number, basically. And then, so we'll walk through the string, we'll count each one, and then once we've counted each one, we would walk through the map or the array and just check these conditions. And then either fail as soon as we can fail, or succeed if we get all the way through and everything looks good. Okay, so yeah, so I think it'll run in big O of n, and so true. Let me just think real quick. Yeah. Okay. So let me think if there's an optimization here.
So then we're gonna. So I think you talked about the algorithm. You talked about its complexity. So here we're on to optimize. And this is where the book talks a little bit about it. I think there's what's called BUD,
Mm-hmm.
Which is BUD means for bottlenecks, U for unnecessary work, and D for duplicate work. So think through, do you have any bottlenecks?
I don't think there's any bottlenecks. It seems pretty straightforward. We're just going to walk through each character and count them up.
Any unnecessary work?
The only thing that I think there might be another way around, but I'm not thinking of it at the moment, is after we count everything up, kind of doing that second loop over the counts that we just took to verify. I don't know if there's a way to do that on the fly better, but I think I'm going to have to walk through that, do all the counts, and then once I'm done, walk through that and check. So I don't think there's any unnecessary work.
And what about duplicate work?
I'm only counting each one once, and then I'm just verifying the counts at the end. I don't think I'm doing the same work twice ever. Oh yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, so Yeah, so just, I
Because-
think I heard you say this, but just kind of summarize it for us.
Yeah, so there's certainly worse implementations I could think of, but I think the best case I can think of is running in Big O and walking through each character in there, counting them up, and then verifying the counts after we've counted everything. Okay, so let's write some pseudocode and talk through it a little bit. I'll just leave that for the moment. I really don't need that. Okay, so the string that I'm being given, is that something that I can just assume is typed into the editor, or is that something that's going to be passed to the args from the command line?
Yeah, you can just assume that it's like, you can just define a few cases or whatever, make your, you make your own test cases or whatever, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll just assume we have a string and we need a data structure. So I think I'll just start with a map, hash map. And the map is going to hold I don't put characters in a map very much, so we'll see. Let's make sure that works, but it's going to be a character to a counter. And then we're going to loop. So we're going to loop through the entire string. So for 0 to string.length -1. And for each step in this loop, we're going to basically increment the map. So map char count ++. And then once we've counted everything, we need to just verify that that it is or is not a palindrome. So we will, for each map entry, so we need to check. We need to remember if the length of the string is even or odd also. So let's track that up here. So we'll do string odd. This will be a true false. And then for each map entry, so what I'm thinking is we can walk through each entry in here, and we want to verify that the number is even. And in the case where the string is even, so string odd is false. If we ever have a case where we have an odd number of characters, then we would immediately fail. If the string length was odd coming in, then we can fail once. So we're going to need another variable to track that single odd character. Okay, so string, let's call that string length odd. And we'll make one more and we'll call it odd found. I'll just call that true false. All right, so for each map entry, if entry.count is even, we're good, no matter either way. Yeah, and I'm just thinking also, well, yeah, okay. If entry count is even, we can really just continue. Else. And okay, so if string length odd is false, so if we had an even length string, and now we have an odd number of characters, we've failed. Otherwise, if we've already found the odd and we get a second odd, then we fail. So this would be if odd is found equals true, then we fail. Else, we're still good, but we need to set odd found. Okay, so we're going to loop through each entry. Entries even were good. I was thinking before that what would happen if we only ever went down this loop for an odd number, but there's no way to get all the counts being even in the case of an odd length string. So we're always going to fall down here at least once for an odd length string. We have failure cases. If else, they're all paired up. There's no else ifs. Okay, and then we would want to, we need to print out our success or failure. So we should just track it. Let's say success, false, we'll say success is false. And we'll default success to true. And if we never mark it as false, then we will have succeeded. So then we'll come down here and we'll just print out print success. Okay. All right, so I think this is what I'm thinking as far as an algorithm goes. We walk through kind of my example cases here. So for something like cat, we'll enter the string, we'll iterate 3 times, we'll count C, A, and T each once, we'll come down here. We have an odd length string in this case. So for the very first check, if entry count is even, it would not be, it would be odd, so it would fall into here. It would check if string length is odd, which is true in that case, so it would come down here, and it would see if the odd was already found, which in this case it would not be, so we'd fall into this loop on the first pass for this for the C, depending on the ordering. Then the next letter would come down here. Again, it's not even, it's a 1. It would check if the string length is odd. If it's not, it'd come here, but odd is already found. So in that case, success is false, and we would want to make sure to break. That would be the case here also. As soon as we find success, we can just bail out of this loop. For just a single character, it'd be the same path we just went down. It'd be odd length string, which is going to fall down here. The first case, odd found is false, so it would come down here. So mark odd found, but otherwise it would succeed. So that should work. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and implement. Again, the only thing I'm kind of, I haven't used a map with a character as the key really
So
much.
before you jump into the implementation, let's play the bud game again. So
okay, sure.
Bottlenecks, unnecessary work, duplicate work. Is there anything in here that's duplicate, unnecessary? Do you see any bottlenecks? the more pseudocode you get rid of, the easier it is to begin implementation because you don't have to figure out how to write it.
Right. Okay, let's see.
Once again, I'm trying to give you extra coaching. If I was interviewing you, I probably wouldn't cut you off or anything. It's more of a coaching session. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of what things you want to watch out for.
Yeah. And, you could ask 100 times. I'm always going to feel like I'm overlooking something. And I absolutely might be. I mean, obviously, there's 2 loops in here. It'd be nice to have one. There's probably
since this is a coaching session, I could prompt you a little bit, but
yeah.
You're counting up the number of times you see a character. Does it matter if you see it 5 times or does it matter?
No,
if you see
yeah,
it 7
okay,
times?
right. That's kind of what I just had pop into my head. So really we don't care. We don't really care what the count is at all. We just care really if it's even or odd. And we could certainly track that by just doing like a Boolean, something a little simpler. We wouldn't have to worry about the counts at all. Trying to think if, there's probably a really tricky way to use like bit mapping to use 1s and 0s to track each letter, and then.
Well, you're getting really on the hot with the true and false.
Yeah.
So if you have an entry in your map that's false, is that any different than the empty case?
It depends if true or false it means even. So if I assume false means an odd count or an even count, and true means an odd count, then no, not being there or being false would be identical, would be the same.
So yeah, I'll prompt you just a little bit for purposes of coaching in this one to help you along. So if you have, let's do your AA case.
Yep.
What's the simplest version of your AA case that you can do?
If the letter was just tracked with a Boolean that I flipped for the first day and flipped back for the second day, and then just checked if that was true, that would tell me right away without counting or anything. So from your previous prompt, it sounds like if it's false, I don't need to track it at all. I don't need to even care. I don't need to track anything.
Yeah, so you're super close. So what if instead of setting it to false, you just remove it?
Yeah, right. So sure, I could have. So I still would need to track any current letter that that is odd, that has an odd count. Right. Okay. So here's right. So I could track. Let me type this up. Track any letter seen that has an odd count. Stop tracking if a matching letter is found, which would be an even count. When finished counting, expect for an even length string, 0 things tracked. Odd length string, 1 thing tracked. Let me think back through that and see if that makes sense.
Once again, there's a lot of times where in the problem you're not going to get the gotcha, so don't feel like you always have to find the gotcha. As long as you explain what you're doing and it's not super awesome, as long as you walk through what you're doing, it'll probably be fine for the interview. But you always want to think through the butt about how you can reduce things, because it's going to help you with clock management. The more you can think through how to reduce code, the less lines of code you're going to have to write, and then quicker you're going to get through the whole problem.
Sure. Yep. Okay. So I think if I just track letters that are that have an odd count, walk through the thing, and then check how many letters I'm tracking at the end. I would expect there to be none in an even length string and a single one in an odd length string. So this kind of gets to what I've been hoping to avoid, is this kind of second for loop of walking through my counts after I've done the count. This would give me just a simple, length on the map, basically. Check. So let me think of a test case here. Just run through a couple of these really quick before I type up more pseudocode. So track any letter that's B and C no count. So we would track a C with a 1, an A with a 1, or not a 1, no counts anymore. So we would just track a C, an A, and a T. So in that case, it really can just be a set that they're in or not in. And that set would have 3 things in it. So it's not length string. We would expect 1, so that would fail. In this case, we would add A, B, and C to the set, and then we would remove A and B from the set. So we just have 1 thing, so that would pass. We'd have just 1 thing, that'd be fine. Add, then remove, that would be fine. Okay, yeah, I think that will definitely be faster, and it would save a bit of memory too. So really, if I just have a set of characters, I do need to know if the string length is even or odd. Don't need to know that anymore. I do need to walk through.
Do you need to know if the string length is even or odd?
Well, for an even length string, I would expect my set to be empty. Is that, let me think. So if I had an even length string that was like A, B, C. So we might be able to say something like, if there's more than 1 thing in the set. Because I don't think there would ever be possible to have a single entry in the set for an even length string.
Yeah, and once we can get kind of grindy in the details on this. So I think you're getting really close here. So, I think you pretty much have it. So let's kind of, for the sake of time, we'll move on.
Yeah. Let's.
I think you have it. I think you have it. I'll give you as many hints as you want here, but.
No, okay. So let me give it a shot with what I've got and actually go through and code it up. And then if I do something stupid still, you can point it out. So we definitely need to count through each thing. So for 0 to string length, okay. So if set contains car okay. Set contains character, remove it, otherwise we'll add it. And then once we're finished, and then when we're finished, we'll do set. Okay, so if set length or size greater than 1,
fail else pass. I think.
And then once again, as a reminder, this is something that I recommend you practice. So if you go to LeetCode, if you do problems for cracking the coding interview, follow these 7 steps while you're practicing.
Yeah, sure.
And then I generally set a target that you should be done in 10 minutes. If it's taking you longer than 10 minutes, then that tells you that you need to get on pace to do that. I highly recommend you grab a friend, grab someone else to practice with. And so like sometimes we'll even do like a race. We'll pull out the problem. The 2 of us will race. That gives us a little bit of the nervousness. And then at the end, one of you may solve it, one of you may not. And then you can walk through, oh, hey, this is how I did it in under 10 minutes. The other guy will be like, oh, I didn't even know what to do on this one. And so taking the time to practice these over and over is what's going to get you ready for the interview to be an elite.
I gotcha. So, I mean, obviously something like FizzBuzz is pretty straightforward. This is a little more complicated, but still not too bad. How complex of problems do you typically expect on interviews?
So if you read this book, Cracking the Coding Interview, if you read her book, she actually recommends that interviewers such as myself do not use questions from the book. But sometimes they do. Sometimes you find interviews that do. It depends on the company. Some companies have a set question bank they draw from. I mean, my current company is a little bit more Wild West. I don't think we have a set question bank. Sometimes they'll do something that is kind of straightforward on LeetCode. Sometimes they won't. The biggest thing to know is if you get through her Cracking the Coding Interview, it kind of prepares you for most cases. Because even if you basically get into the problem and you type it out like a typewriter and be super fast, they're going to think that you just memorized the recipe. And they're not looking for someone to just come through and memorize all the recipes. So the biggest thing to know is not solving it is not necessarily bad. Taking some time to solve it is kind of good. Because if I can pretty much tell you what happened to most interviews, if you solve it super fast, they're just going to throw a wrench at you. They're going to be like, okay, now handle, like, we said, don't worry about uppercase, lowercase. Now they're going to be like, well, handle uppercase, lowercase. They'll start to throw more wrenches just to try to see, did you just memorize a solution or do you actually understand what's happening? So I always say it's like Top Chef, where like anybody can bake a cake, but like, does everyone understand that like when you remove the salt from the cake, what things you have to change? So like Top Chefs is going to say like, you have to bake a cake with the things from the groceries from 7-Eleven. And it's like, well, what if you can't find salt? Like what substitutes can you put in for salt? So anytime you do these interviews, it's going to be kind of like Top Chef where, anybody can follow a recipe and bake a cake. We're not really looking for that. We're looking for, do you understand what the salt does? Do you understand what the flour does? Do you understand what the yeast does? And like, if that's not present, what's the substitute? So even if your cake kind of turns out disgusting, if you can at least talk through like, these are the different ingredients in my bread, and this is what salt does, and this is what yeast does. That's the most important part.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it just kind of depends on what level you're interviewing at. I mean, if you want to interview for the top level and really want to good marks, because a lot of people think of it as like pass fail, like, well, I coded good enough, I probably passed. You just have to note that like if you're really going for like a senior position, they're timing you, they're looking for how clean your code was, they're looking at your syntax. There's really nothing you can do but just practice and be a good coder. You don't want to be super sloppy, but like some people ask me, like, should I be like commenting everything I do? I don't know. I don't think they expect you to like, like some people will put out like, Java docs at the top of their function. I don't know any interviewer that's looking for like Java docs at the top of your function. I think you're just kind of wasting your time if you type out Java docs.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just, so you don't want to be too verbose about like, you're not writing production code we're going to put in production, but you definitely don't want to, it's always a bad sign if you're declaring like variables that are unused. Like it's like, you have unused variables. That's where the bud is really helpful.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. And so, and it just depends. Like I like using the book because I'm just kind of a book guy. There's some people that like LeetCode because it has kind of the questions built in. Definitely on the Codility platform, they have some cases where they'll do performance if you practice some of the problems on Codility that they have in the problem set. You might be able to solve it, but then some of the cases fell. And for you to get it to work on the best case, you have to kind of do maybe a different algorithm. So just know that there's multiple ways to solve it, and making sure that you practice a number of different algorithms is just always good. So there's just no substitute to just kind of practicing.
Yep.
But but following these 6 steps, you'll find in most cases, as long as you optimize and do a good bud and reduce it, you'll have plenty of time left on the clock to solve it. So clock management is another big thing to practice. Because it's pretty bad if you're, you don't want to just jump right in and start writing code, because then you're just gonna be in trouble. If you're, 15 minutes, 20 minutes into it and you haven't even written your algorithm yet, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that kind of gives some hints.
Yep. Okay.
So,
let me go through and type up some code actually.
Yeah, let's actually get to the code part.
Okay. So we'll start with cat here. It's not going to import packages for me. Geez. Util. Okay, so thought process, if the set contains the character, so checking if string at each index is, so let's do this. It's not gonna like that. Back to that in just a second. Let's see. Okay, so index f returns an int. We want a character. Wondering if I could just cast it. Nope, it's not like that. So during real interviews, is like using Google allowed, or do they is that super frowned upon?
Super frowned upon.
Okay.
Like most interviewers will not tell you no. If you're like, hey, can I Google this? They'll be like cringing and being like, well, if you really want to.
Yeah, but I wouldn't recommend it.
You'd be better off trying to collaborate with them and ask them like, hey, are you willing to tell me like I would treat them like a coworker and just be like, hey, can you remind me? Like, I forget, I think you have to do this or that. Can you remind me what I might need to do here? It's good
Yeah.
it'd be better to ask them questions than, because pretty much if you if there's two things that'll kill you. If you stop talking,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, stop talking and just being quiet, you're done. Because either one of
Okay.
two things happens. Either A, you're just not sharing and you're not a very collaborative person to work with, or B, they think that you're basically cheating. Like you're switching out to a different tab. But the worst you
I
can
gotcha.
do is just go quiet and then just hear the keyboard rattle, rattle. It's like, well, he's doing searching on Google.
What's he typing? Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's way better to ask them for help than try to switch out to Google.
Gotcha.
You know, and it just,
well, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So that, yeah. And then, you know, hopefully you prepare, you know, everyone has like a glitch once in a while that they get nervous. I mean, I demonstrated that on my side.
Sure.
You know, so most people, I think they're not going to fault you as bad if you just ask like, oh, gee, I can't remember how to do a, you know, yeah. And then the one thing that I always look for too is like, you know, sometimes I'll try to give them a hint or tell them something's wrong. I mean, be very careful arguing with the interviewer. I always
Sure.
kind of joke like, you know, there's a chance I'm wrong. Like it's possible I'm wrong. And like after the interview, I go look up the answer, and if he's arguing with me and I'm right and the interviewer's wrong, then like that's pretty much like an automatic fail for me. Like the guy just argued with me when he's totally wrong, and I told him 3 times he was wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're really sure about you being right, that's fine. Because I'm gonna go look it up, and if you're right, I'm gonna be like, okay, he was right, I was wrong. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes people are right, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, I'm not just looking, keep in mind this whole process, I'm looking to see, are you a good coworker? If you're sitting there and being a jerk to me, even if you write code like a typewriter, I'm going to be like, because there's sometimes I'll look like interview notes and it's like, hey, his code looked pretty good. I don't know why the guy failed him. There was obviously probably something that happened in the conversation where he's just like, I did not get along with this guy. He was a jerk. Something happened. So note that it's not just getting to the right answer. It's just demonstrating what kind of coworker you're going to be is just as important as writing the code.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So my thought process here, at least the part that I was having trouble remembering is I know for collections we need to hold non-primitive, so a box primitive. So I need uppercase character here, and what I don't remember exactly is if this is just going to return me, if this will return me actually the character, or if this is going to return me like if it's going to return me like an ASCII like number, you know, like 50 or 60 or whatever. But casting it to character might take care of that. So we'll go with this for now and kind of see how that works. And then we just need to print out the result at the end. So size greater than 1. Okay. So as far as my test cases go, I have cat here. It's going to iterate this 3 times. It should index of 0 would be a C, so this should be a C. It checks if it contains it. It doesn't. So come here and it would add it. Same thing for an A. Same thing for a T. Size would be 3 in that case. It would come here. Size 3, so it would mark it not a palindrome. And for something simple like AA, it would fall down here the first time, and the second time it does contain it, so it would remove it. Size would be 0, and it would fall down here. Okay. I think it's probably worthwhile to just run and see where we're at. So And looks cute. Okay, palindrome. So that's definitely not right.
So
not a palindrome.
I'm not completely sure, but I think your error is probably going to be on line 16.
Yeah. Okay, that was the one I was worried about.
But I'm not sure. I think your index of, like I said, I've been doing a lot of languages lately.
I think there's a caret. I'm dumb. Okay. Yeah, I don't do a lot of like single character work with strings in Java.
Yeah, and that's for the interviews, you definitely want to do single character works. You definitely want to do arrays. You definitely want to do, like a lot of people get thrown off by binary trees or tree traversal algorithms. So you want to make sure you cover a good chunk of those.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That makes sense. All right. So remember the caret. I've swapped that. That looks good now. Let's change to a string that is a palindrome and see what we get. Okay. Let's try a bit longer string. So we'll do ABC, ABC.
Yeah, and it depends on it depends on the interviewer. It depends on what level you're interviewing for, and they'll also sometimes look for things that, if you put on your resume like I'm the best tree traversal guy in the West, and then you like totally biff on your tree traversal question, then like, that's not good. So also, do know like what you put in your resume. Like it depends on the interviewer, but he does look at that. Like,
Right.
if you claim you're like the best, test-driven development, if you're the best test-driven developer that was ever on the planet, and then you don't write some test-driven development test cases as your program, he may be like, well, what's going on there?
That makes sense.
So just also make sure that you kind of match up what's on your resume to what your style is in the interview.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do you draw the line on like using programming languages? So like the last few years, I've used a bit of C++. I've used Python just a small amount. But if someone threw me in front of an editor and flipped it on Python mode, like I wouldn't be typing this up like I did here. So should I not put it at all? Should I just write that I've exposed to it?
As far as claiming language on your resume, I mean that's not really a problem. I mean most people that are more experienced, I think both of us are, we've probably encountered 3 or 4 languages in our life, so it's not, you saw how you did in mine. I did Go, but I actually messed up and did a C idiom about true or false not being needed. So my biggest advice, 2 biggest advice I always go about language is, 1, don't try to do one that you think Microsoft will like. So like you've done Java. We don't do as much Java here, but that's not a problem. We interview in Java and we expect you to learn. C# is quite similar. So they'll give you time to learn that language. It's not a big deal. I think sometimes in the contracting realm, it's very specific. Like we need a guy who has 8 years of C#. And if you don't interview in C#, you like don't get the job. That's not how the case, at least here. And as far as I know, all the tech companies, the Googles or whatever, they're flexible about what language you interview in.
Okay.
And so definitely don't if your favorite, most comfortable language is Java, don't try to interview in C#.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
As far as and then just for your practicing, I don't know, like I once upon a time, like I know like 5 or more languages, so I thought it would be impressive in an interview to maybe like try to do it 5 different implementations in 5 languages.
Sure.
I don't think that ever worked out well.
Yeah.
So I would definitely, for your practicing, like choose one language to practice in and then get really fast at it and just make sure, it is embarrassing. Like, that's another thing too, is like, you might be used to like a fully fledged editor that you don't have to do your imports. And so I know for me, at least, I practiced most of mine and just in a TextPad editor. Well, I did it in Vim for me. I did it in VI, but definitely don't, I don't know that you want to be practicing. Yeah, I personally would recommend you practice without a syntax highlighter, without a, because you really want, and then really like test yourself that, can I solve it in under 10 minutes? and then can I run it the first time without any edits?
Yeah. Okay.
And doing that from TextPad, because it really, it's terribly embarrassing if you get in an interview and forget like public static void main or something.
Right. Well, yeah, that'd be pretty
Like,
bad.
I mean, it's like one of these things, right? How often do you write public static void main? Like never.
Yeah, very rarely.
But in an interview, if you're stuck forgetting what public static void main is, it's like, that just doesn't look good. So, and it's something that you can easily practice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you got it to run. Yeah. So, I'm trying to think of other kind of gotchas. Yeah. What other questions you have about kind of tips or stuff I can show you? That I would say the number one thing that people underestimate is they think, oh, I just wrote some pseudocode, and they think that it's good. Like, you definitely have to write code that, like, you really got to get to the point where you're having code that's execute. At least here at my department, we use Codility. You can hit the run button and things run.
Yep.
I mean, really getting to a state where it's running is your best bet to get a successful vote towards a hire. Note that it's not binary. They don't just say yes or no. They do try to capture notes depending on the interviewer, and like things you say, they'll capture. One little hint I give is that you'll be surprised. Most interviewers are just trying to do their best to just kind of capture, like, as me as a hiring manager, when I look at the interview notes of someone else, the best interview notes is that I can kind of pretend like I'm there and what happened. And so, I mean, there's just weird things people might do where I don't even know. The guy might get up and dance or something, and he'll just put in his notes like the guy. Well, I don't think that's ever happened, but I'm trying to show you an example of if you were to get up and dance, the person's probably going to write in the notes like the guy got up and started dancing, and then he'll just kind of put it in the notes without judgment, and then anyone else that reviews it will lose it in context, like, and everything is taken holistically. So like if you just totally like bell on one question, if you do good on all the interviews and just kind of bell on one, then that's one thing. If it's like you show a history of I just get up and dance for everything, which may be a good thing, maybe getting up and dancing hired.
It's passion.
It'll just kind of be in the notes. So I'm trying to think of a better example than dancing. I mean, somebody asked like, I don't know. They just kind of ask bizarre questions like, I don't know. They just asked interesting questions that probably weren't the most appropriate for an interview. And it's like the person just wrote like, I just see in the interview notes like person asked about XYZ.
Yeah.
So just kind of know, like, if you ask like, hey, like, hey, do you have any questions for me? And the guy's like, hey, like, what are the color of the walls at Microsoft? He's just probably going to write in his notes like he asked what the color of the walls at Microsoft were.
Yeah.
And so I would just always try to recommend that you, for the purposes of the interview, of getting through the interview, there's different cycles. There's different books I can recommend, like Tony Bashira's Acing the Interview. There's different books that kind of talk about when to ask which questions, but like during the interview, you really want to focus on coding, showing that you're a good coworker. If you ask too many weird questions about like, the color of the walls, which that may or may not be bad, but it just sometimes is like, he just kind of puts that in the notes. Just know that that'll probably show up in the notes that he writes.
Yeah. So I originally went down the path of kind of same, iterating, doing counts, and then coming back and checking the counts at the end. Obviously, this way is going to be, faster and ultimately easier and less code. But if I didn't have you giving me cues, I clearly would have gone down that other path. How does something like that pan out on a real interview? I mean, does the specific algorithm make a huge difference? Are they looking to see that you solved it, that you wrote decent code? Is it more about the algorithm you used to solve it?
I mean, it's it's always code. Like a lot of the questions kind of have a gotcha. So the gotcha in this one is be able to kind of remove that second loop. If you were to implement it with the second loop, I don't think it would really, in most cases, it wouldn't hurt you that you did the second loop. The only thing that you're hurting is yourself, that you're just adding a lot of time on the clock.
Yeah.
So it all just depends. Like if you're really fast and you manage to get the second loop in and you did it all in under, 15 minutes, you're good to go.
Sure.
Where you get into trouble is if you start not optimizing keep in mind also in the second loop, you're just running through the loop twice. And remember, at the end of the day, it's still big O(n). It's just 2n
Yeah.
and then drop the complexity. So since you were under big O(n) anyways, it doesn't matter that you have the second loop. It's just eating a lot of your time clock.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough.
So, I mean, my simple answer is if you talk slowly, then you're going to be in trouble with 2 loops. As long as you don't want to be talking so fast the person doesn't understand you, but as long as you're working fast enough, it's better to get to working code than to try to make some perfectly optimized algorithm.
Yeah.
I mean, I myself am like a systems programmer, so I have done things in under 5K. And so I would always get thrown off on these loops. I did an interview once with, I don't know, one company, and I just got really wrapped up on I just got so wrapped up in trying to come up with a perfectly optimized algorithm that saved the extra 2 bytes of memory that I didn't even write any code.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's better to get, that's why you always want to do your brute force solution first, and then you kind of got to look at your clock. Idealistically, you got to your brute force in under 5 minutes. And then if you got to your brute force in under 5 minutes, then you're like, hey, I got 10 minutes to think about how to optimize this, and you're sitting pretty.
Yeah.
If you get 25 minutes into it and you're still working on your brute force case, then it's like, yeah, let's just get some code on the board here.
Fair. Okay. And if you get asked about a problem that you just don't understand, don't know, can you ask for hints, or is that considered a big no-no?
I mean, most interviewers will probably nudge you along. I think it's not so much, it's probably less about asking. You're going to probably get most of your hints when you talk about your test cases and different things. I mean, I would say the biggest thing is if, you definitely don't. I mean, I can't remember. I had some interviewers that cut me off, or I tried to tell them something and they're like, oh, be quiet, I'm thinking. And it's like, oh, okay. And keep in mind, not all interviewers are the best interviewers on the planet. Some interviewers there might be a case where you got to tell him to be quiet because he just keeps talking every time you think, and he's not giving you hints. And you might have to just be like, not every interviewer is a professional interviewer. I mean, I'm not one for sure, but so you have to take a fine balance of maybe there is a time that's appropriate to cut him off so you can actually write code and think, because he might be just jabbering and not even allowing you to think. But in most cases, if he's saying something he's trying to give you, he sees you driving off a cliff, and so it's at a minimum, pause, write down what he's trying to tell you, think about what he's telling you. And then, nobody, I mean, I think most interviewers are gonna basically in a nutshell, if you ask, it's probably best for you to go down the wrong path, and if he really sees you going off the wrong path, he'll probably give you a nudge. If you're just dead in the water and can't think of anything, then you might be able to, it's one thing to ask for a hint of hey, I forgot if or is an or sign, or type out or. Asking for a hint like that probably is okay. Where if you ask more of it, if you're just I'm stumped, I don't know what to do, can you give me a hint? That's probably really bad, because it's oh, this guy can't think for himself.
Yeah.
If you get to a point where you're stuck and don't know how to proceed and can't even guess a way to go forward, asking for a hint is not going to look good in the interview, because it's you got to move, you got to move forward. It's just anything is better than nothing. Saying something is better than just going quiet.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know if that answered your question. And then once again, people don't seem to understand how, at least in our department, I mean, Microsoft does things different across all the different departments, and different companies do things differently. Most people are shocked to hear, I mean, at least for our department, writing code is weighted very heavily.
Mhm.
And so I know a lot of people that kind of, they hit like, oh, I wrote great pseudocode, and I impressed the guy so much with my knowledge. I don't understand why I didn't get hired. That's like, well, we're really looking for people that, can show us that they've complete code.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's see, there's one thing. What did I want to say about that? It's about, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, it's just, there are people I've seen that have gotten hired in our department that got only the pseudocode. But it just kind of depends on how the overall interview went and different things. So there's not any hard and fast rules.
How many interviews do you guys normally do for a candidate before giving them a yes or no?
At least in our department at Microsoft, and as far as I know, Microsoft's trying to standardize this quite a bit. And obviously right now we're during COVID time, so everything's done virtually, just like over the Teams we're talking now.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, you'll generally have one tech screen.
Oh, okay.
And then after the one tech screen, then you'll move to what they call like the all-day loop. And the all-day loop is 4 to 5 interviews. They generally try to do it in the same day.
Okay.
It depends on the position you're interviewing for. Generally speaking, I would say there's positions that are quite competitive, and there's positions that are less so competitive, depending on a specific kind of stack they're looking for, what very specific credentials you may or may not have that may involve U.S. government systems and stuff.
Yep.
So the biggest thing I always kind of like I get some people who are just totally feel like, oh, I'm just so unqualified. I'm not even going to interview with Microsoft. The biggest thing you have to always remember is that, I mean, most of the time we're hiring for a position, it more or less has to get filled. They're going to interview a batch of candidates and they're going to hire the one who did best. So you don't have to do perfect. You just have to do better than the other people.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so it's a simple equation. The more you practice, the better you'll do. And there's not like a solid bar of like, oh, like I have to do this well to get hired. And it just depends. Like there's sometimes when, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure some recruiters could tell you some techniques of like when's the best time to apply, but I'm sure there's different times that are a lot of candidates applying. I don't know. You could imagine, I can't imagine a lot of people applying during Christmas, possibly.
Right.
So maybe there's a little tip, like, try to get your interview over Christmas. There's got to be times throughout the year that there's like a lot of candidates available, and it may not even be seasonal. It may just be random. Like, so it could be possible that you interview and you might have done really well, but there just happens to be that week or that month or whatever time period they're looking over candidates that they just happen to get lucky that there's just a lot of candidates to choose from. And then there's other times where it's like, oh, well, he's the only one that wrote any code, and you totally get hired.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely always deal with the imposter syndrome, and even getting a simple problem like this, is like terrifying. So I definitely have had those kind of feelings of like, I could just go back to a contractor spot, and they're going to ask me 5 questions about my resume and check, my credentials and call it a day. Ultimately, that isn't what I want to do. But yeah, going through a technical screen, and then I'm assuming the all day thing involves more technical questions and checks, and that process sounds not fun. That sounds terrible to me.
Yeah, and that's where that's where you have to understand that it's based on whether candidate. And keep in mind I just don't really know. Maybe I'm the only one. I'm the only one that I don't know. I remember when I went out to Google, it was just like, to me, it was just like, maybe I'm funny. If I could like win a trip to Hawaii or win a trip to interview with Google, I'd be fine with them coming out to quiz me for a day. Maybe I'm arrogant that way. But now, to be clear, I enjoy it because I've learned to enjoy it. But I mean, I'm super nervous. I'm beyond nervous when I go into these interviews. Like, I've taught classes, at the different universities. I've taught 100 people. I've been on the spot writing code. I can write code in front of students and not be nervous at all. But I go to any interview and I feel like everything's just blackouts and I can hardly write a line of code. And
Yeah. I think it's that feeling of being challenged, right? Like I've been doing this for, however, 13, 14 years, whatever, and I've proven I could do it. Obviously, I do well at my jobs and everything. But on a daily basis, I don't have someone like in my face, like, I need you to solve this, puzzle or riddle or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That,
and
that
that's an
feeling of being
example,
challenged is a little scary.
and that's kind of an example of like, I think when I first felt one of my first kind of coding interviews, I really got frustrated because it was like, what? That's so unfair. How do they judge every year that I've worked for just based on what I did in 30 minutes? And I totally didn't prep for the interview.
Mhm.
And, it really kind of comes down to the simple question is when you understand that these companies interview this way, you got to ask yourself the question of like, what's it like working with other people that have passed through this process?
Yeah, that's fair.
And then you kind of have the confidence of, oh, well, it is a little extra work for me to get through this, but once I'm there, you know, um, I'm in a space that has a little bit higher bar. I also do amateur radio. The amateur radio guys are sometimes kind of arrogant because it's not a very difficult test to pass the amateur radio test. You just have to like
Mhm.
say some frequencies and pass some basic. It's like a 200 question test to get your amateur radio license. But the amateur radio guys are really snooty that like, oh, only the elite of us can pass the amateur radio test. So not any of those random people that are too dumb that only use Twitter or on amateur radio. So
Fair.
it has a little bit of that effect, but it is kind of true. Like, you to get a job at a company kind of similar to one of these tech companies, like you have to want to be there. So I know some people kind of have this nonchalant attitude of like, well, I guess I'll talk to them, but if I'm not going to prepare for it, and if they don't like who I am, then they can just do whatever. You do have to kind of want to be here to get the job,
Mhm.
which includes some prep. And I'm trying to think of kind of key parts to that. Of I guess the biggest thing is just understand that it's a journey. That like there's a good chance. I mean, based on I kind of obviously we just did a mock session today, but you did fine. You would have passed with me. So you're obviously at a pretty good spot. It's just all about how nervous you're going to get and get through it.
Fair.
So, which just happens sometimes. And I guess you have to just think of it as the journey that like, if you don't get the job this time, then, you just kind of better prep for next time.
Yeah.
And then another thing too is just having a good attitude that like, even when I finally bought the cracking coding interview question books and started just doing those, like I said, your goal is to get them done in 10 minutes. So some people think of it as like this daunting task, so they have to like dedicate every Saturday prepping.
Mhm.
I mean, if you even just kind of set aside like 10 minutes at the beginning of each day and just do one per 10-minute for the beginning of the day, just start out your day. I'm working on this for 10 minutes and you just try to crank one out. And then if you're not done in 10 minutes, just put it to the side, you're done. I learned even just before I even got my job at Microsoft, I thought I was a pretty good programmer. But when I prepped for the interview, I found that I was like coding way faster in my current job.
Hmm.
And so, a lot of people, that's the biggest thing that's kind of an eye opener. Most people think they're a better coder than they are. And when you actually go through these practice problems, you start to realize that like, maybe I'm a little bit more rusty than I thought I was.
Yeah. Well, I'm worried about being rusty. I've worked a number of jobs that have been like really old projects that deal a lot more with maintenance than writing new code, and I definitely want to get out of that. But my expectation is to be headed back that way, to find that, and whether that's Microsoft if that works out, or I guess a contractor gig again. Either way, I need to get out of where I'm at. So yeah, I don't know timelines if there is good times to apply out there, or if it's just prep and when I'm feeling ready, then go for it.
Yeah, I
But
mean, the
either
best
way,
timeline is just the sooner you can get the interview and give it a try, the better. I mean, right? It's the whole thing, like you know, the whole like if you never make a basket, you don't shoot.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, you know, you don't, you know, to me, there's a kind of a fine line of, you know, I would generally set your prep timeline between 4 and 8 weeks, because in my humble opinion, like if you're getting way past 8 weeks, you're probably either not spending the time to prep anyways, or you're trying to over prep.
Mhm.
And you know, if you spend about 4 weeks and you can knock out one problem a day, you should be in a pretty good spot. And then it also depends, like, you know, how much luxury you have about vacation time and stuff. Like I had the luxury of, I think I took the full day off the day before my interview. I took off the day of my interview. It is a bit of an investment to take off a couple days.
Mhm.
Um, and but I mean, basically, if you can look up any job numbers. I mean, all the companies are hiring like crazy. So if you do some level of prep, you'll probably get a pretty good offer at one of the companies. And yeah, and then you know, it's in the news that's for some of these federal contracts. You know, SpaceX is kind of leading the way about how they're forming NASA with contract-based stuff.
Mhm.
A lot of these Silicon Valley companies are starting to get more into government type work. So um, you know, they pay quite well. It's not
Yeah.
quite the same as some of these other positions that um, you know, you just kind of get a set fee. I mean, that's the thing that I kind of like about Microsoft the most is like I think some people you know, some people are used to kind of a different mindset of just I have this years of experience. I deserve something. I mean, Microsoft, it's all about how quickly you can write code and get it done and shipped.
Mhm.
And so some people are kind of shocked where they're like, oh, I thought I was like super senior. They didn't do so well on the coding screen. They may have even got an offer, but their expectations of like, I'm expecting this amount of money doesn't match up. But the good news is like, even hypothetically, if you kind of come in at a lower salary at a place like Microsoft, as quickly as you come back up to speed and knock off the dust and produce better code,
Mhm.
you can get like at our, you know, we promote more, you know, we promote more than 2 times a year. So you can get a promotion pretty
Oh,
much at
wow.
any time. So it is theoretically possible to get promoted multiple times in a year. There's no set algorithm for that.
Hmm.
You know, so, you know, I know some people get, especially like you talk about, if you're kind of switching over from government contracting, where they get like kind of really set up and like, well, I need to make this amount of money to come over. It's more about, you know, if you're able to land a position at a top tech company, then that'll give you the flywheel to start to like spend more time practicing and becoming a better developer, and then you'll get those promotions really quick.
Yeah.
Um, and then so, you know, that's part of it too, is like if you really want to work here, like kind of work with the recruiter to like say, you know, hey, maybe I'm willing to interview for a slightly more junior position to get in the door because I really want to get out of this pattern of, you know, maybe some integration work or some other things you're doing that's not writing code all day.
Mhm.
Um, so if you're in a place where you can financially kind of deal with maybe a lower initial salary, it's definitely worth investing in yourself versus, you know, in government contracting space, I generally don't recommend taking like a lower salary because it's like you kind of like it's like you kind of get cemented into this path for the next 5 years or more,
Yeah.
and you're really kind of hurting yourself if you take a lower salary in government contracting space. But in the tech space where you're judged greatly on your merits, it's a whole different game.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good to know.
Um, yeah, what other insider tips might I be able to give you?
So I guess part of the deal with working out there, right, is having a clearance. Is there a difference in positions that some just straight up, you need it, you're going to be on site, and others are, you work with people that don't have it. Is there certain positions that would be better to apply for because I have one and that are much more limited, or is it just you apply for whatever position's open and it's great if you have one?
Yeah, so specific to Microsoft, any of the positions that require clearance have on the job title CTJ. Well, most of them have it. So if you just search the job title CTJ, that'll tell you whether or not it requires clearance.
Okay.
It's pretty simple math to know that jobs that require clearance are going to have less applicants, so you'll have a better
Yeah.
shot
Right.
at it. There are a spectrum of jobs. There's a job code that's kind of more kind of like site reliability engineer that's less coding.
Mhm.
The site reliability engineer, that'll focus more, slightly less on coding and more on, your skills in Linux or operating systems and stuff. Definitely has a coding component, so you can't get hired on as an SRE just without knowing how to code. And then there's more heavy coding positions. My department, we don't really have any SREs. So
Mhm.
we mostly do coding, and then anyone in my department works mostly in the public, works alongside with people that don't have access to any government facilities, and they're spending most of their time coding. So there is a spectrum there of opportunities and jobs,
Mm.
and you can work with kind of the recruiter or with a friend that that can kind of guide you, that if you want to do, I mean, most people don't want to be sitting like in a secure facility all day. So if you're willing to do that, it might open up new options for you to be landed to a position that kind of gets you to something that may be easier to get into that position.
Yeah.
And then, and then obviously positions that require much more heavy coding may not be in the secure facilities much. And they may be more competitive, and it depends on the department. I mean, you could imagine a certain department. I'm trying to think of some legacy technology that's been like, I'm sure there's some team supporting, like, I don't know, Visual Studio 6 or something.
Wait.
So there, obviously, if you apply to like some team that supports Visual Studio 6, that's probably going to be different than the team that like is doing the latest and hottest and greatest thing.
Yeah.
So probably get, yeah. Yeah. What other questions you have?
I think that covers all the ones I can think of right now. We've talked before, and you've given me you've answered some other questions. So I don't think I have any more right now.
Okay.